All right, welcome to lesson 9.5, and we're going to continue talking about geometry, and today we're going to kind of revisit what we did about a month ago, almost exactly, on Pi Day. We talked about pi and how pi comes from circles and how it has to do with circumference and diameter of a circle, so we're going to get into that in just a minute. I've got some friends here to help me today, and so let's say hi. First we got Allie.
Hi.
And Callie.
Hi.
And Rain.
Hi.
You know, you guys should all take up instruments. That would make a good group name.
Instruments?
Ellie and Kelly and Rain. Yeah, that would make a good band name. In any case, let's get right into the definitions for a circle. So let's start with this diagram in white, and this is basically a circle. All right. Now, a circle is defined to be the set of all points that are the same distance or equidistant from a single point. And actually, way back when, in like Egyptian and ancient Grecian times, people have always been able to make really good circles. All you got to do is put a stake in the ground and stretch out a rope really tight and just keep it stretched and just basically scratch a line around in the sand. And what you're doing, the rope becomes the fixed distance, and you just make all the points that are the same distance around. Okay. Now that fixed distance is in blue right here. It's called the radius. So the same distance is essentially the radius. So the radius is the distance from the center of the circle out to the edge. Okay, so AD, segment AD, would be a radius. Okay? And remember from last chapter, remember the notation for segment. You use the two letters and you put the bar on top. Let's skip down to a chord. A chord is not like the chord that you have in music where you strum like 3 notes at the same time. This is a chord, a geometric chord, and all a chord is it is a line segment that cuts across the circle from one edge of the circle to the other. Okay, so an example of a chord would be segment DE. Another example of a chord is the one that goes through the middle. You could call it segment BC, or you could also call that segment BAC, and use all 3 letters if you want. It's the same segment, right? Now, if that segment goes through the center, if a chord goes through the center of the circle, it's called the diameter. So the diameter is basically the longest of all the chords because it goes right from one edge of the circle to the other, right through the center. That's going to be the longest chord you can get. Okay? All right, now, all of this, so let me just real quickly, so the terminology you need to learn, you need to know the definition of a circle, the set of all points that are the same distance from a single point. That single point is called the center. I suppose I could put that down, although that's kind of obvious. Okay, diameter is a chord that goes through the center of the circle. A chord is any segment that cuts across the circle. And this final one we're going to talk about on the next slide. Circumference is the distance around the outside of a circle, and that's where pi comes in. Okay, who remembers how to find circumference from? You've seen this before.
You draw a cut, like you make
so
a cut.
Well, right, so we could actually measure around like a tape measure or something like that, but the way we compute it mathematically, let me back up for a second here. Let's start with circumference before we get into area. Okay, the way we compute the circumference is what we do is we take the diameter and we just multiply it times pi. So the circumference of a circle is pi times the diameter. And a lot of times we use capital D for diameter. You don't have to, but since diameter is kind of long, we use capital D. The radius, on the other hand, we use a small r, and since a radius only goes from the center of a circle out to the edge, it turns out that the diameter is exactly twice as long as the radius. Make sense? So 2r is always equal to d for any circle. So sometimes you'll see the circumference formula written as the circumference is equal to 2 times pi times r, because the 2r part is the same as the diameter. So the 2r basically replaces the d, and a lot of times we split the 2 and the r up. We put the 2 out front and the r after the pi, because 2 and pi are both numbers. You had a question, Ellie. What was it? Okay. Well, let's go on. This is not part of this chapter in your book, but since we're talking about circumference, let's go ahead and talk about area as well. So what you do for area is, again, you use the Greek letter pi, and it represents 3.14159, and it goes on forever. And what we do to find area is we take the radius, and we multiply the radius times itself, so we square it. It's not the same as doubling it. So if the radius was 5, we would get 5 times 5, which is 25. And then we'd multiply that times pi, which is about 3.14. That would come out to be about 78. Okay, so big difference between area and circumference. In addition, when we do circumference, we're going to get linear units. So we're going to get things like centimeters. When we do area, we're going to get things like centimeters squared. And that's just an example. Okay, but it's different kinds of units, if that makes sense. Okay? Okay, so that's the basic definitions of a circle. Some things that you need to be able to do for classwork tomorrow is if I tell you the radius of a circle, you ought to be able to figure out its diameter. Just double it, right? If I tell you the diameter of a circle, you ought to be able to figure out the radius. Just take half. If I give you either of those, you ought to be able to take it and multiply by pi and get the circumference. Okay? And it's perfectly fine to just use the approximation of 3.14. Later on, we'll be doing areas of circles, so I might as well just throw that in for now. But again, what I want you familiar with is the basic terminology that's part of a circle. So we got diameters, radius, chord, and then the distance around the outside is the circumference. Okay, that's just past 5 minutes. We're going to say goodbye. See you in class tomorrow, and thanks for watching.